Howdy there, everyone. We are back for episode 3. I can count, right? 3. Of Rapier Ramblings, trademark. So I guess pick up on what we've been doing. I was at Frogfect last weekend. I had to bow out a rapier because I tweaked my hip, but I got a second place biscuit and URG longsword, so medals for the metal god. I don't actually care about longsword.
How much you love longsword, right?
The best weapon, obviously. It's why we have a podcast on it. Rapier Ramblings. The secret is longsword.
Yeah.
How about you?
I haven't gone anywhere or really done anything crazy. On the topic of longsword, I've been testing these new 5-finger longsword gloves from China. That I'm they're exclusively longsword gloves. They don't fit in a rapier. They don't fit in a saber, but they're really, really, really protective. They're like more protective than Gabriel's, but I'm kind of having mobility stuff with them. So they're like, I'm working with the guy to kind of figure out some troubleshooting stuff before I either recommend or don't recommend them. So working on that. But other than that, that's what I'm doing. My next sword thing is your stab fect in 2 weeks.
Yeah, April 12th. I will update
Get to go
the
there and
scorecard. Hopefully
get
we get
wrecked
to
by Stephen Chady.
fight each other. No, there are some local names and other names coming, so it'll be very interesting. I'm fighting, you're fighting, Sai's fighting. One of my coaches has decided to switch from SCA to HEMA for this, so that'll be entertaining.
That's exciting.
Yeah, they are a mod specializing in Master of Defense for those who aren't SCA pilled like I am, but they are a cut and thrust specific Master of Defense in the SCA and really, really good at it, so that'll be interesting to see if they can cross over into HEMA. But yeah, there are some very talented fencers coming. It's going to be single sword, and because it's a rapier tournament and Purple Heart had a sale on George Silver medals, I don't know where I put them, but I got George Silver medals. And a ribbon for whoever takes fourth.
And a ribbon for whoever takes fourth?
Yes. As is my tradition, probably me.
I thought you were you're pilled on third. You're stuck on third.
Either third or fourth.
Gotcha.
I never escape it. It's truly a thing that I have suffering from success, really. But yeah, so the big thing that happened in the rapier side of things was SoCal sword fight. Oh boy, the rapier and dagger fight from it was Rob Childs doing Rob Childs thing to some poor soul who put up one hell of a good fight, but at the end of the day, Rob Childs did Rob Childs things. Which we'll probably do a breakdown of that next episode, but this episode, because no one's done it yet, we're doing the single rapier match because this channel is rapier. We should probably spend more time doing single, between Sawyer Freschi and Woody Craig. So this was a fight that had been a long time coming. Woody actually came over from Australia for this tournament and is arguably the best rapier fencer in Australia. And you know, in the American scene, everyone kind of jokes that the Aussies are on a big island and aren't competent, but this fight definitely proved that sentiment wrong. It was one of the coolest rapier matches I have gotten to see in a hot second, so when you're ready, let's go live. Ish.
Ready when you are.
Alright, full screen mode. And starting in... So, for context, Woody is the one on the left with the cup hilt. Sawyer is the one on the right with the Pappenheimer or clamshell style guard. Both of them are using long, thin rapiers, and I think at the end of this episode I want to ramble about how metas develop and change depending on where you're located. But yeah, let's get the show on the road. Alright, so that first exchange was a really interesting setup, but it's really, really fast and hard to see. So, we play this back at super slow speeds.
Do you remember how to tab forward on YouTube?
It's the arrow keys.
Greater than, less than. The little alligators that...
I'm glad I'm not the only one who referred to them as such.
I literally talked to a PhD professor, and they too call them that. We are not alone.
Beautiful. But yeah, you see here, Sawyer's actually extending fairly far forward to try to control Woody's blade and provoke high. And then Sawyer has set a pattern, right? That high provocation, extend, takes the leg. So if we watch that, oops, wrong buttons. No one saw that. Boom, Sawyer provokes high, right? Woody takes the bait, Sawyer resets, Woody comes low, Sawyer brings Woody back high, does it a third time. This time Woody starts to engage, and right about now, one last provocation to make sure Woody really thinks Sawyer's going for a high line thrust, and bam, takes the leg while Woody is on the back foot getting ready to bend the high line thrust. Nothing really fancy here, but in our last breakdown with Sawyer, we saw this too. Sawyer's really good at making a pattern, and then I just yeeted all the junk on my desk and breaking it. And it's cool seeing this done at such a high level.
Yeah, and I mean, it's one of the other videos I watched this in. You can tell that it's harder to see on this one, but Sawyer really, like, the provocation, he waits until Woody like puts effort into the bind and kind of offsets his sword, and he uses that tempo. And it's like, it's so hard to see because it's so subtle, but Woody just puts a little bit of extra oomph in the bind, and that's the tempo that Sawyer takes to hit him.
Which is probably exactly what he was looking for. It's really well done.
I think what's really interesting about this rule set, or this environment, you saw a lot of leg cuts, or a lot of feinted leg cuts too. It was like that front leg was really not high scoring target, but definitely one that decided a lot of matches, whether people were respecting guarding low or not.
Yeah, it's, again, this brings us back to that conversation of metas I mentioned, because like in your region, and since I travel there a lot, kind of my region, they don't score cuts to anything except the head, which really changes kind of what you look for and how you provoke in a sword fight. Boy, howdy, I'd love a version of this that's edited. And the fencers re-engage. Boom. You'll notice Woody's playing a lot in Terzi, and actually Woody is interesting because he is probably the highest level Fabris practitioner I've ever seen, and Sawyer is a Neapolitan or Marchielli practitioner, as we mentioned last episode, so it makes a clash of kind of early but long-lasting Rapier versus very, very late period Rapier. And look at the distance management on this exchange. Like, nothing's been landed, and both fencers are dancing at the absolute edge of their danger zone. It's really impressive. So yeah, Sawyer's looking for almost a glide there. Woody thrusts in, Sawyer just barely gets out of measure. That is beautiful work. The director intercedes for a second. Gosh darn it, how dare you. But yeah, this is just really high level, trying to jockey for position, and neither fencer giving the other what they want, which is really well done. And then here, Woody starts to cut the line and circle into Sawyer's blade to try to get dominant position. Sawyer baits an attack to try to counter. Like, this is a lot of just jockeying for position and looking for the right time to act.
I find it really interesting just watching them go to, like, the difference in how they shift their weight around. Like, Sawyer moves so, like, both of his feet go up and down at the same time.
Yeah.
Whereas Woody shifts his weight between the two. And this is what just happened here is really, like, gonna define the early periods, because Sawyer also fences with his arm, his offhand, like, really disengaged, and Woody is gonna use that to his advantage here in this exchange.
Completely agreed. So if we kind of just tab through that last little touch there's my alligators. Woody, again, looking for that position, controlling the blade. Sawyer basically throws a beat to try to get out of Woody's range. Woody immediately re-engages. And again, you see that really cool stance shifting that Woody's doing to try to keep himself just out of Sawyer's reach without ever having to take a step. Because if your feet leave the ground, some fencers are good enough to capitalize on that as a free tempo to get a touch. And Woody is making sure that Sawyer doesn't, because Sawyer is definitely good enough to do that, right? So that little stance shift is kind of keeping Sawyer at bay. Quick cut of an angle to try to set up the bind. Sawyer thrusts in. There's that weight shift pull to keep Sawyer from being able to attack. Just like Josh described, it's really cool to watch. And then right about now, I believe, is the exchange we want to actually see. Sawyer extends, and this is a big thing that people tend to forget in a rapier, is your offhand fucking exists, and is a really valuable tool to use. And then bam, there's the grab, right? So Sawyer, what we see here, and unfortunately there's a director in the way, or a judge in the way, but Woody extends and forces Sawyer to become static very briefly. And then as Sawyer does his pullback, Woody grabs the blade, and bam, there's the shot. Just barely makes it in right there, as you can see by the line of the blade. And a little bit of flex at the tip, it just barely comes in as Sawyer hunts for the hand parry. And then bam, Sawyer comes in with a thrust of his own, making it an afterblow, which means I believe this technique scores 2 points instead of 3 in this rule set. So, what are your thoughts on that, Josh?
Yeah, it's hard to see. Like, I would love to see Woody's, like, how he approached in to grab the hand. I'm also curious. I don't know the full extent of the rule set here, because his fingers do wrap around the blade. Are like sword grabs legal?
Yes. Sword grabs are legal, from my understanding.
Love that.
Yeah,
that's one of the things that I don't like that they do in the eastern part of the U.S. is they're like, no fingers can wrap. Like, you have to basically windshield wiper it or nothing.
Yep. I completely agree, because the windshield wiper of shame is kind of frustrating when it's like, well, I have your sword on my hand. Can I just grab you and whack you upside the
right.
head?
But what's crazy is that Sawyer almost voids it anyway.
Yeah.
Like, as much as his parry hand, his offhand was disengaged, like, he got it up almost immediately and was on just the edge of his own distance at that time.
Yep. And I guess they're missing some of the first part of the fight. So in this first round, Woody actually takes the round, I believe, or Woody just denied his point. I don't have the audio on because it turns our recording into chaos, but yeah. I think Woody actually denies his touch here, but it's still a setup that we see come into play for the whole rest of the fight. It's one of Woody's biggest strengths, is being able to really use that offhand to set up a deep target thrust.
Mm-hmm.
And both of these fencers are fairly good friends, so they are, willing to kind of play the game, and we're back in the action. This time Woody tries to pressure in and just does not feel comfortable. And neither
You see Sawyer starting to shift his weight more. Like, he's a lot more front leaned here.
Yes, I think Sawyer's trying to provoke the direct thrust, and Woody's just not taking the bait, which is, like, good on Woody, honestly. Because, yeah, and Sawyer's really looking to provoke probably a centerline thrust here, and Woody's absolutely refusing to take it. Which, again, if you're fighting a fencer who likes provocation, taking the bait is the worst thing you can do. And then Woody closes, starts to pressure in. Sawyer just barely fades out of Woody's effective range, and we have a beautiful view of the director's backside. No insult to the judge, he's doing a great job. And I believe that is the thrust to the arm. So it's a little hard to see, but if we pause and I use the little alligators, I'm going to be calling them that for the rest of my life. How dare you?
It's honestly almost a repeat of the last exchange. Woody uses his parry hand to start.
Yep. Yep, Woody's closing, and that's the one kind of minor flaw with Sawyer's stance, is his backhand is a lot further away. But yep, Woody engages with the hand and is really looking for that grab into a thrust. And Sawyer's just ghosting his measure. This time Sawyer extends, and then if you look here, you can see the hand coming forward before it vanishes behind a human body. Sawyer pulls his sword out of the way, but in that retracted tempo, Woody lands the thrust to the arm. This is actually really interesting, because in forcing Sawyer to retract, Woody establishes a pattern. Sawyer knows that Woody wants to grab his blade. Sawyer's not going to let that happen, and Woody uses that to his advantage.
I think too what it's hard to get at, but or like hard to tell for sure, and I can't read either of their minds, but I think on Woody's end, I don't think he ever really intended to grab Sawyer's blade the second time. I think going and doing that motion got Sawyer to pull back enough that he can land the hit, because he doesn't he goes in for that sword grab, but he doesn't like it looks like he's following the thrust in faster this time, like almost like he knew Sawyer was going to retract.
Yeah.
So he's breaking his own pattern and pre-adapting to Sawyer's solution before he can do it.
Yeah, no, it's really well done. And it's also, I hate to use a German longsword term here, but there is a concept in German longsword. The German term is schießen. The English translation that I prefer to use is shooting, which is just chasing someone in if they retract, and that's exactly what this is. Woody forces a retraction, and then chases Sawyer in as he retracts to land the touch. Really, really good fencing here. And we're back to the action, folks. It's time the fencers close in. And this time Woody's actually starting to circle instead of moving in a line to try to get to an advantageous position. So Sawyer studies both Marchielli and a little Destrezza, and you see some of that Destrezza action here as Sawyer kind of goes into angulo recto. So attempted thrust at the leg, thrust in, nothing lands. Both fencers are doing a great job of managing distance. Woody chases Sawyer back with a cut to the leg. Nothing landed, which is both a really beautiful blade work and distance management exchange. Like, these are
It's really fun to see the difference in the ways that they move their bodies too, as Sawyer's like hopping back and Woody's like taking these long extended steps.
Yeah, it's such polar opposites in that regard, but I have a lot of, like, it works for both of them. Like, this is the gold medal match of a fairly stacked tournament. And there's the leg cut. I think Woody just avoids it and immediately tries to press the advantage, but Sawyer cuts the ring, and I think they're calling the leg cut here. Which, that was just a cool exchange. I don't think there's a ton of breaking down we can do beyond holy fucking distance management, Batman. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, no, I agree. I think what the advantage of taking these little hops like gives you a little bit of like preloads your next action, whereas like shifting your weight, I think the difference is like the short little hops gives you an extra added quickness, but the shifting your weight the way Woody's doing it allows you to kind of change direction on a dime. I think it both fencers are obviously really good at it, but in this instance, those little short hops allow you to kind of make micro adjustments to your distance in a way that's harder if you're trying to not move your feet as much. So I think that's why Sawyer was able to land here.
So I think the interesting thing about this is, in that exchange, Sawyer was kind of dictating the measure. Woody was kind of dictating the blade work, so it came down to a battle of tempo, and I think they washed the exchange, and boom, we're on to the next one. So this should be interesting if I'm remembering the timestamps correctly here. So that's the other thing. Sawyer likes to play very retracted with the blade low. And Woody comes with a thrust, and Sawyer just barely avoids it before re-engaging. Like, this is really good distance management. Neither fencer quite willing to commit on a big action yet. Woody's pressuring in, but Sawyer's doing a good job of just kind of keeping him from being able to properly pressure. Parry, attack no. Beautiful parry riposte exchange there. Like, this is nuts. Sawyer forces Woody back with an extension, a non-committed extension of the arm, which is the thing my coach talks about doing constantly. Or one of my coaches. And then Sawyer comes with the big line thrust. Woody circle parries, which is something you don't see a lot in Rapier, but both of these fencers are also decent foil fencers. So that has a big factor in their Rapier work as well. Now we have just more kind of pressuring in. Woody's forcing Sawyer back. Sawyer looks for a hand parry this time.
Sawyer's fighting from the like a um not necessarily from the outside, but taking like a wide stance at a lot of these. It's looks like he's trying to get a really like he's retracted and trying to get like exactly that thrust, and he's gone for it several times.
Yep.
And Woody catches on.
Yeah. No, it's really interesting if you wind that back real quick and look at the action that actually lands a touch after a beautiful back and forth. You actually see Woody do another hand parry, right? Woody's really got good hand parries there. But if you watch, Sawyer actually engages here in second. I believe it's a little hard to tell lines in this video on the outside line, which is Sawyer's preferred line from having talked with him about it. But yeah, you watch this. Sawyer tries to engage on the outside in second for a shot of his own. Woody's doing a really good job of keeping Sawyer uncomfortable. Bam. Sawyer comes to second. Woody fakes high, comes low, puts his hand in the way, and puts his point in Sawyer's ribs. Right there.
What's interesting, if on the other angle, it looks like the blade passes by without catching, but Sawyer calls it as a good thrust, or else I think the judges would have just called both as passe, honestly.
Yeah, but there is it coming in just barely as a hit and skip.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I could see this going either way if they weren't allowed to self-call. Like, when I go to the New England meta, you're not allowed to self-call or even deny points most of the time, which makes Rapier and Dagger real interesting.
Yeah. What's interesting about this is that Sawyer goes for that like really, really deep secunda thrust 3 or 4 times, and he didn't really commit to any of them. And Woody chose this moment where he had a read that Sawyer was coming in, and he both moved his head and moved his hand in the way to land that touch. I think he had a really good read on what his opponent was doing.
Agreed. This is a really interesting thing, because if you watch this again, Sawyer is also more planted in this exchange than any of the previous ones. Like, he is fully committed to this action, or committed enough that Woody knows he can get away with it, right? Because Woody actually starts his attack right as Sawyer steps, so Sawyer can't bail on this exchange like he had in previous attempts, which is really interesting to note that Woody picked up on the fact that Sawyer was committed and went for his own counter shot. Because if we watch the movement, I believe they start at about the same time. But in this case, Woody has the clean hand parry. It's just really cool fencing. And then,
well, they start at the same time. I like Woody's footwork too, because he steps in a lot deeper than he did for the past couple thrusts where they all go, they're playing at distance. Like he takes that gathering step up where he knows that he's in, like they're almost in just like fully extended arm measure, like
which George
the shortest measure
time of the hand.
Right. So he knows that it's go time, and I think Woody starts this. He's the one who steps into that measure to get Sawyer to finally commit to that, and he uses it to his advantage by moving his head and getting the hand parry in.
Yeah, which brings in the concept of voiding, which is a thing a lot of people kind of forget you can do in a sword fight, but just slipping like you would in boxing can definitely be an advantageous maneuver.
Very Fabris to move your body offline.
Which makes sense. Woody studies Fabris. So it's also a really cool clash of styles here, and I think Woody is arguably the best Fabris-themed fencer in HEMA right now, which is just awesome to see. Alright, so this brings us to, I believe, the last exchange of this round, but don't count me on it. Because this was a best of 3 rounds, so a lot of fencing here today. Normally we break down 2 fights in these videos. Today we are really only doing the one because of
Because we're technically doing 3.
Yeah. So yeah, Sawyer provokes in that very low, extended stance. Woody throws the cut to the leg that Sawyer gets out of the measure of. You notice Sawyer retracts his sword there, which is interesting to me.
First
Sawyer
time he's
paws
done
the
that.
leg as well. Nothing done.
Way
There's
more
the
aggressive.
attack. There's the counter-attack, and the touch has happened. So this is just a really good use of distance management by both fencers, and thinking well on the back foot by Woody especially. If we look at that last flourish there, right? Now that I know about the alligators, I am in heaven. Sawyer's been, again, doing that highline provocation that he likes, right? From here, Sawyer starts a march. Boom. Comes with a swipe at the leg. Woody just narrowly slips it. Passes back, plants himself. Airborne fully here as Sawyer pressures in. Barely wards off Sawyer's thrust with his guard. Sawyer changes guards, tries to come in with a slash. Woody takes the leg, attempts to cover, and I believe Sawyer's cut hits guard. I'm not sure if it also breaks through to head or not, but as you can tell here from the line of Sawyer's sword, the reason we're using this video, by the way, is because it was the highest quality of the 3 that exist of this fight. So you get the best freeze frames out of it, but yeah, it just barely hits Woody's guard, and I'm not sure if it wraps to head or not because I'm not on the other side here. Which makes this just a really cool exchange because they're both so active. Bam. Whack. Bam. And then Woody is out of the ring.
It looked like Sawyer wanted to kind of turn, as he was high, it looked like he wanted to turn it in to a thrust in the bind, like a prima thrust. But Woody was just like, nope, and left the bind and smacked the leg instead.
Yeah, this was... I jokingly call it long saber, but no, they are still definitely doing rapier, and it's really, really well done. Yeah, so on to the next pass. Yep, Sawyer calls the leg, and I think that is the winning touch for this round. Fencers get a 1-minute break, so let's speed this up for a second. So this is the second round of 3. Both fencers now know each other a little better, so they get to work a lot quicker trying to set up provocations. Sawyer looking for that engagement. One of the things I really like about Sawyer's fencing is that he's always hunting for a bind instead of, like, avoiding the blade entirely, and he's really good at getting that control, which is a rare thing in rapier fencing. Fencers circle, and they switch sides. Sawyer, again, looking for blade contact, parries Woody's thrust just barely. Cut to the leg, warded, this time with a sword parry. More back and forth, neither fencer really willing to commit. This time Woody's actually a lot bouncier and more active than he was in the first round. And there, Woody's attack is yes. So if we pause... Oh, that's a double. Bam, bam. Right there, both fencers stab each other. This was, honestly, I think the only double of the fight. But
there's one at the very end.
Yeah.
I don't think they call this a double.
Oh, they might call Sawyer's out of time because Woody's lands a ways before. But yeah, here Sawyer drops his sword, comes back up, right? So the sword drops and Woody uses that tempo to thrust in. And
yeah, so Woody hits arm here.
Yeah. Yep, right there is the shot directly to the arm. Whoops. And then Sawyer follows up with an afterblow, so I think this is a non-scoring exchange still. Because of how the afterblow works in this rule set, it is -1 point, and a thrust to the arm is 1 point, but it doesn't count as a double. Still just a really cool exchange, and that little drop of Sawyer's blade was all Woody needed to take the shot. Like, that's really impressive fencing.
I feel like Woody is a lot more comfortable in this. I'm sure they're both in a high stress situation, but like Sawyer seems like he's still trying to find his solution. And
yes.
He tried the the outside Secunda stuff, and now he's trying kind of a lot more circling and offline footwork.
Yes, and that's kind of one of the cool things about HEMA that makes it different from Olympic, is that you can circle. You can do offline movement on a piece. I know because I've done epee and a little bit of sport saber, but you're much more limited than you are with a ring like this, which is one of the big differentiating factors between HEMA and sport fencing. So it's cool to see people actually doing good offline movement. So many leg cuts. It's amazing how meta-defining leg cuts are in this particular tournament from the footage I've seen. So yeah, here's Woody, again, looking for that inside line, pulls back for the leg cut, falls short, and Sawyer comes with a counter thrust that Woody narrowly avoids.
Such a good void from both of them.
Yeah, this is really good. Woody lands the cut to the arm. Sawyer hunts for the afterblow, but I think it is out of tempo. So if we pause and go back just a second, right? If I can avoid not right-clicking every time. To about here, if we start to watch this in super-duper slow-mo, there's the leg cut that Sawyer just barely voids.
Like it's so, and that's with the tip kind of bending with the force of the cut. Like it's so close to him, and then this void is even closer.
Like, that is a millimeter. The fact that the judges didn't call this blows my mind a little bit, but, like, just perfect distance management from both of these fencers.
And the athleticism that it takes to send that thrust even after he's still, like, half avoiding with his leg.
Yeah. It's just absurd. Boom, just barely voids. Woody brings his blade back and tries to gain some distance. Sawyer sees an advantage and pressures in. But Woody has really good gamesmanship in this and just kind of keeps his head in the game the whole fight. Sawyer comes with a thrust of his own that... You can actually see the red tip of Sawyer's sword just over the director's shoulder, I think. Right there.
Interesting. I see what you're talking about.
Oh no, that's just a guy's shirt.
No, that's that guy's shirt. Yeah, it was like...
Phantom sword.
This is what the high-level HEMA is we're just looking for these tiny little things that might not even actually exist. Right. So the fact that these judges were doing this all day, too.
Yes, I know I've met the head ref, Isaac. He is probably one of the best rapier and dagger fencers I have ever met. And the dude's shorter than I am, and when I fought him at AFO in free play, he picked me apart. I think I landed one touch out of like 20. The dude's insanely good and has a really good eye for fencing and is, I believe, also a classical fencer. So he's used to judging like foil matches with eyes instead of electric boxes. So he is definitely qualified for this, and the judge seems to be doing a great job too. And bam, Sawyer pressures in. Woody is off position here and still manages to parry Sawyer's blade with a hanging parry, which is nuts. And look at that commitment on Sawyer. Like, he is going for the touch here. Woody cuts down to the arm, bam, right there. If we see that little blur, connects with the elbow here and then follows down to the body. Sawyer throws the afterblow that Woody narrowly parries. Like, to be able to throw that big of a chambered cut while lunging and pull back quick enough is just athletic as all get out. Like, both of these fencers. And then, bam, that's the touch. Sawyer calls to his arm. And we are on to the next exchange. Let's slow this down so we can actually have a vague idea as to what's happening. Because, like, this is at quarter speed, and they're still moving quickly. It's really impressive how just nimble these two fencers are. Again, Woody looking for that engagement in Corta. Sawyer with a nice wide stance. Parries. Beats the sword down, nothing lands. Woody bails before Sawyer can do anything. Provokes with a leg cut. Sawyer avoids. Sawyer's really bouncing now, looking to be a little bit more aggressive, I suspect. Woody comes with the leg cut again. Not sure if it connects. I think it's just barely makes it in.
Yeah.
Woody... So, not so much the touch in this exchange that's interesting, but rather what Woody does after the touch to keep Sawyer from coming for an afterblow to negate the point. There's the bounce back and forth. Woody probes in with a thrust. Sawyer avoids. There's the leg cut. Bam. And then Woody immediately comes back up and presents his point so Sawyer can't chase him in. A big thing if you're taking a lower value target or a riskier shot is generating a threat so your opponent can't just double you to a higher priority target and get the touch. Especially in a lot like my region for HEMA. I know people that will happily eat a leg shot if it means they can put a point in your mask. Like, any day
Right.
of the week.
And even then, like, something that small, like, the judges had to sit there and talk about it for like 30 seconds afterwards too. Like,
Yeah.
they might not even call that at the same time. So being ready and having that active defense, I think that in of itself is why HEMA is that I like HEMA so much, is that you have to fight. Generally, when the rules are done well, you have to fight to like make sure that even if you didn't stop your opponent, you're ready to defend yourself again.
Yeah, which is really, really cool. And I think when I'm directing, I'm an MMA fan. I love watching two sweaty men or women roll around on the ground beating the crap out of each other. But one of the things that the refs always say is protect yourselves at all times. When I'm directing, I say the same thing because I've seen a lot of fencers not protect themselves at all times.
Mm-hmm.
And a big part of doing this sport is staying safe because we're using heavier swords than Olympic. There is genuine risk in this activity. Less so with rapier than, say, longsword, but there is still more risk than if I picked up an epee, you know?
Right. Well, I think that's the two big differentiating factors between like high-level HEMA and high-level like MOF. Besides the fact that the high-level MOF would just walk in and raffle stomp any HEMAist,
Yep.
is that like is A, fencing to the eyesight of judges, and B, fencing to like protect yourself afterwards.
Yes.
Not that like Olympic fencers wouldn't be able to do that if they needed to, but like it's not as prevalent in their sport, so they don't need to train that. And I think that is a really cool and interesting part of HEMA.
Yeah, the afterblow is a concept you don't see in a lot of sports. I think the closest we get is the lockout timer on epee, which is, I believe, 0.25 of a second. Don't count me on that. It's been a while since I've done Olympic. Olympic fans, angry comment below, I guess. But yeah, it's cool seeing that both fencers are mindful of not dying the entire exchange. So here, Woody lands the leg cut. Fencers go back to their corners. And enchanté to the next pass. Because this one took a lot of deciding. Woody immediately comes out of the gate. The other cool thing that both of these fencers do, and this is something we noticed from last time that Sawyer's good at taking advantage of, Woody is already on guard the second the judges call go. Because if we remember the Rob fight, Sawyer got robbed a couple times expressly because he wasn't ready out of the gate.
It's a bigger ring too.
Yep. So there, Woody lands the thrust to the stomach. Sawyer chases in. At least I believe that's how that goes, and I'm not sure what happens from there. Also, I'd like to note the heel of Sawyer's shoe is coming off. Sorry, I got completely sidetracked by that, but if you look at his heel...
Oh yeah, you're right. That's crazy.
Well, time to retire those shoes, bud. Woody does a cool spin move as Sawyer chases him in, so blam. There's the touch. Sawyer's thrust goes... I promise I can computer. Sawyer's touch actually goes between Woody's legs. I keep hitting the wrong buttons. Bam, and Woody gets the thrust to the deep target. Sawyer chases after, but by that point it is too late. So the cool thing about this round, spoiler warning I guess, is Sawyer actually makes a come-from-behind win of the second round. Which is just awesome to see, but here is a really good example of constraining an opponent's blade, which every fencing master does it a little bit differently. But if you look at what Woody does in this exchange, is he gets his guard on the weak of Sawyer, which forces him down in between his legs instead of being able to stab probably the hip where he was aiming. So boom, there's the provocation. Woody comes back, and see how Woody's guard is just engaged that whole time, and his blade is really focused on keeping Sawyer from being able to do his job, like actively putting Sawyer in a bad position, taking the line he needs. Bam, there's the touch. Which is just really awesome to see. And Sawyer goes for the afterblow, but at that point, Woody has already bailed on the situation. Which is just such good fencing.
However, they wind up giving Sawyer the points for this?
Interesting. I'm guessing they're calling his thrust to the torso. Oh, I remember this exchange from when I watched it live. Sawyer's thrust does connect there. It's just really hard to see in the video, and Woody self-calls and denies his points, which I believe gives Sawyer the win.
Not yet. There's because now it's 4-4. They were down 1-4.
Yeah. So let's just play this exchange back one more time to see if we can see what happens at speed. Like, look how fast these two are moving. Oh, Sawyer does just barely sneak into the stomach there. If we rapid fire play this back, and then Woody gets the afterblow, which is out of tempo, I think, in this rule set. Boom, boom. Thank God for frame by frame. Ah, it does arrive right there to the leg. Yep.
But they give him 3 points.
I think this rule set had a control element, at least for longsword. Maybe they're calling that here. Or I just missed something. It's really hard to tell. Yeah, it goes into the leg there, and then Woody gets the afterblow, I guess. I am honestly uncertain. But yeah, that's still just a really cool exchange by both fencers, so...
I'm backing it up and listening to the judges on the live stream.
I guess I'll turn my audio on for a second.
So I don't think they gave either of them points for the constrained thrusts. And I think the only thing they gave points for was Sawyer's follow-up thrust as Woody was spinning to win.
Hashtag spinning to win is a tempo.
I don't know if I necessarily agree with that, but like the judges don't have slow-mo built into their eyes, so you know,
yeah,
it's really hard to tell. It looked like as we saw it that there was Woody's constrained thrust that pushed Sawyer's between his legs, and thrust down to the leg, and then he's kind of turned out of the way, and it almost like it's hard to tell whether Sawyer's arrived to the mask or just kind of missed, but
yeah,
you know, it is what it is.
Yep, that's how the cookie crumbles sometimes. Which, yep, that's what they're giving Sawyer points for. The score is now 4-4. And we're into the next exchange. Just look how fast these two move. Again, both really doing a good job of dictating distance here.
Sawyer lines are really good. Yeah.
That is, I think, the round-winning touch, too. So if we play that back at incredibly slow speeds, because... Wow.
It's also the most committed attack Sawyer's done this whole time.
Yeah, like, Sawyer sends that. And the cool thing is, there's just enough setup to make this count, because Woody's really on the back foot here. Like, if we play this back, Woody is at the edge of the ring and doesn't want to go out, and Sawyer knows that, because I believe ring outs score in this rule set. Don't count me on that. They score in a lot of rule sets. Boom, Woody drops his sword and pulls back, and as Woody takes his big step back, Sawyer commits on a fletch. And the cool thing about this is if you watch Sawyer's sword and Woody's sword, Woody's not really generating a threat right now, and Sawyer has an almost textbook constraint on the blades. If you follow my cursor for a second, Woody is coming up here, Sawyer is here, and as we watch this technique land home, there is literally nothing Woody can do about it.
Mm-hmm.
And then Sawyer yeets past him. This is a perfect use of tempo, honestly. Like, because again, you can't really see it, but Woody pulls his blade back just enough that Sawyer, or drops his blade, and Sawyer uses that blade drop tempo to, bam, thrust in and leave Woody just on the back foot. And this is, I believe, the round-winning touch. Which leaves us one round left to go. This is a long fight, folks.
What's really interesting about it, too, is that, like, he wouldn't have constrained if Woody didn't respect the threat either, which is another thing with Kima. Like, Woody's blade was not in line to get constrained there until Sawyer kind of stepped forward, and then he went up to parry as opposed to, like, taking the double and resetting, which is, you know, better from a Hema mindset, and it's, like, closer to what we're trying to achieve, which is, like, what would actually happen in a sword fight when you're trying not to die versus sportifying it, so...
Yeah, and I think at the end of the day, if we have events with rule sets, there will always be a level of sportification. Like, that's unavoidable. But this is two fencers that really respect the blade and really are figuring each other out, and it's just awesome to see. So, we got one round left to go, folks. And it's much shorter than the other two, thankfully for my vocal cords. I was directing all weekend, so I've been consuming tea and Gatorade to get through this. And this brings us to the final round.
It sounds awful, like an awful combination.
I am a goblin. So yeah, Sawyer Freschi's in, much more confident this round than the last. Woody's honestly unshakable. I really respect just his gamesmanship here. Slowly starting to pressure in. Sawyer's doing his bounces. Both of his heels are coming off now. Sawyer goes for the leg cut. Woody narrowly voids. Starts to pressure back in. Sawyer threatens the low line and nopes out of measure as well. Woody drops low to try to control Sawyer's low guard and get that constraint visually or tactile. Actually, let's pause this for a second and look at that, right? So this is a thing that I've heard my coach talk about all the time. If someone's fighting in a low refused guard, you don't necessarily want to make blade contact because that's what they want, but you want to angle your sword in such a way that you close at least one line they have when they come up. If you watch how Woody angles his blade when Sawyer drops here, he's doing exactly that, and limiting Sawyer's option to kind of known pathways if he tries to come up for a thrust right now. Not a big thing, but I thought it's kind of cool. So yeah, let's see how this plays out. Again, both fencers just kind of looking for control and constraint, neither quite getting it. Woody extends. They're both very neutral right now, and neither of them are quite ready to commit. Sawyer goes for the leg cut.
What I thought was really cool, do you mind backing up for a sec?
Yeah.
So, like, Sawyer's kind of coming forward, and like he's got this really good angle that you could tell that he wants to send his rapier on. And if you go forward a bit, like he gets ready to do something, and it's so subtle, and all Woody does is just extend his arm and put the strong of his sword on Sawyer's weak, and it just negates all of the energy that he was about to throw into that. Like, it's so subtle, their weight shifts just a little bit, but if he hadn't have done that at that exact point, there would have been the tip of a sword barreling at his face at Mach 4.
Yep.
And that's why, like, that's what's so good about both these guys, is that, like, they have the presence of mind. Like, a lesser fencer would have still sent it, and Woody would have killed him. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
But, like, because he didn't, and because he has the presence of mind, this goes on.
Yeah, which is just awesome to see.
And by lesser fencer, I mean somebody like me who just shoots forward like a crazy. Yeah.
You and I both have the bad habit of kind of just doing the patented East Coast rapier joust. Back to the match. Yeah, both fencers are really respecting the other fencer's threat, which is great to see. Woody looks for the hand parry again, comes with the direct thrust. Sawyer riposts to the head that Woody just vanishes from. Such good fencing here. Neither fencer really willing.
I appreciate every time Woody uses his hand, Sawyer remembers that he has an offhand for 0.3 seconds, and then he goes back to...
Yup, it's very entertaining to me. Bam, there's the thrust.
Nice.
I suspect. Oh, no.
No?
Nope. Leg cut just slipped. Woody... Oh, no, the leg cut, I think, connects? Or is Woody just bailing? Nope, Woody just bails on the
Yeah.
exchange. Sawyer's just such a casual guy. Ugh. There's that Destrezza Angular Recto guard again that makes it interesting for an Italian-style fencer to engage with, because you're stuck on the low line, and that's much easier to defend than high line. Sawyer leaves
It breaks
behind
my
both
brain.
fencers.
Destrezza,
Yeah,
Destrezza's alien technology.
correct. But yeah, this is just really interesting stuff. Woody tries to take the low line, just barely ghosts that riposte. Wow. It's insane. Like, the fact that nothing has been landed this long into a pass is just insane.
Talked about it before, like high-level rapier matches being two people who are so good at distance that it's very hard for them to actually hit each other until they do.
The cool thing about this fight is there's almost no unforced errors, but as we see Sawyer self-calling here, Woody forces an error. Specifically in this, if we look at it again, Sawyer's here. Woody fakes the low line thrust, so Sawyer brings his sword down to parry. Woody comes over and fares the touch, which is beautifully done, because Sawyer has a tendency to try to constrain on the low line and then come up, and Woody used that to his brutal advantage here and baps Sawyer in the mask good. Right there. Beautiful touch. Hard to see, so I'm glad Sawyer and Woody are self-calling here. So one more time. Fake low. Sawyer parries. Bam. Which is just a really good setup, because neither of these fencers are making mistakes naturally on your own, which brings you to the level of chess where you have to force your opponent to make an error. And we see a forced error here, which is just really cool, because a lot of times in Rapier, someone does something obviously wrong, and then the other fencer is just savvy enough to capitalize on this. In this pass, Woody used a tendency of Sawyer's against him to get the touch, and I think that's just awesome. We have the self-call, with constraint too. Woody was over the blade, so there wasn't much Sawyer could do to counter that.
Yeah, I mean, he steps in. He steps in with the low line thrusts, and it like anybody would buy that. Like, he really only changes his intention like midway through that step. Like, his foot is then planted in the lunge as he turns his point up to go up.
It's just really brilliant fencing. I think that's a 3-point shot, which brings us to...
That was the first touch of the round, wasn't it?
Yeah. This is the first touch of the round. Which is wild. Like, so much setup and just beautiful work from both fencers for one touch. And we're off to the rat races yet again. This time Woody's again pressuring forward. Sawyer comes for the leg. Woody just barely slips. Neither fencer quite touches the other. Just perfect distance management for both here. This time Woody's looking for that low line feint again, and Sawyer doesn't bite on it, which is a good adaptation from Sawyer. And we have Woody tries for the direct thrust. Woody tries for the direct thrust. Sawyer parries, comes with a thrust of his own, and then Woody lands the contra thrust. Bam, right there. Well, again, constraining Sawyer's blade and locking him out. So we watch this little flurry of blows again. Woody, I promise I can hit buttons on the computer. Woody tries here with that come low. Boom, low line to high line. Sawyer doesn't bite. Sawyer parries in second. Comes with a counter thrust. Woody voids it and comes in with a thrust of his own that just barely sneaks in under the bib, which is just gorgeous distance management and blade control here by both fencers.
Yeah. Again, a lesser fencer would have moved back immediately, but Woody just kind of takes that slight step back, doesn't like break the angle that's constraining Sawyer, and lands the thrust before he starts moving back.
Yeah, it's just brilliant.
Before he starts.
Well done. And it's also an adaptation for Woody because Woody knows that Sawyer's looking to send it down the pipeline because that was kind of the big shot of the fight for the last round. And now Woody is very much so keeping Sawyer from being able to get the tempo and the timing to do that. We will see if this is the fight-winning pass, but I believe we have one more touch.
It's crazy, too, because it didn't look like the judges were going to call that, and Sawyer self-calls on himself, putting it to 6-0. So he's like... It's really hard to do that, like, in a tournament.
Yeah.
Where, like, to knowingly put yourself that behind. So, like, credit to somebody who, you know, is fencing to get better and not necessarily fencing to win, or fencing to make sure that they deserve the win.
Yep, and I really respect Sawyer for that. It's honestly great to see. And we're into the last exchange of the fight, I believe. Don't count me on it, though. Sawyer looks for the hand parry, and thrust is just a change up, and I believe this is going to be hit after blow. So if we pause this...
I think they call it a double.
Mm.
I think this is the first and only double.
Yeah. Which, like, in a best of 3 rounds to have one double, that is absurd, especially in Rapier, which is honestly one of the weapons with the highest frequency of doubles in HEMA. Yep, they're calling it a double. Which means I believe we get one more juicy exchange. Give me dem exchanges. Because there's only about 30 seconds left in the match. Yep, Isaac's calling fence here. Again, Sawyer's looking for something to get back on the scoreboard, but Woody's made a lot of adjustments this fight to how Sawyer likes to play. And there's that little visual constraint thing I mentioned again, which kind of pulls Sawyer out of the guard. There's the leg cut that just barely squeaks in. And I believe that is the match-winning touch, too.
Yeah.
And look how low Woody gets for that. Yeah, if you watch the setup for this, Woody's pressuring in, makes it look like he's going to thrust. Bam, there's the cut. Sawyer tries to slip, but just doesn't have the tempo, and you can actually see the tip of Woody's sword just behind Sawyer's leg, which buys him the distance he needs to connect. And that's the match. So I guess we'll move to our grading, but then I wanted to talk for a second about how rule sets can really define how a meta in HEMA works, because I think that's a conversation that is worth having, you know?
Yeah, I think our grades are pretty easy here. I think it just comes down to pluses and minuses.
Yeah.
I think everybody gets an A.
Yes.
I think it just comes down to honest. I think I would just give Woody A pluses in blade work and timing.
For sure. Woody's tempo timing was impeccable this fight. So my score for Woody is an A in distance, an A plus in blade work and timing. And for Sawyer, it's going to be pretty much the same. The only difference is I am giving Sawyer an A plus in distance management, an A in timing, and an A plus in blade work.
I think my only difference is the A plus. I think we both agree A plus in distance for sure. That was like super amazing from both of them. I think I want to give Woody an edge on the those couple of feints that he threw, where like Sawyer bought them with the low line thrust that turned high. I think deserves him just a little bit of an edge there. So I'm gonna go Sawyer A plus distance, A timing, A blade work, and then for Woody, I'm just gonna go A pluses down the board.
Fair enough. Yeah, this was a brilliant match, and could you imagine if every Rapier fight was like this?
half of the HEMA community would say it's amazing. The other half would say that they're playing pretend sport MOF and be angry anyway. But welcome to HEMA.
Correct. Welcome to HEMA. Everyone has an opinion. Half of them are wrong. Half of them are also wrong. Everyone's wrong. Congratulations. But yeah, this also, one of the big things we see here that you and I don't see as often in our metas, I see it a little more because King's Cup is right next door and King's Cup scores everything, including like cuts to the torso, cuts to the leg, cuts to the arm, like with no rotation requirement either, so Butterfly Kisses score, which is weird, but like in your region, since you're kind of Ohio River Valley, only cuts to the head score, right?
Mm-hmm.
So how do you think this fight would have changed if it was in, like, the Ascalon rule set versus, say, this rules, the SoCal rule set?
Yeah, well, I mean, first off, like, with the Ohio region, I think this penalized doubles, because I know they counted them after a certain amount.
Yes.
But they also have
3 doubles and you automatically lose unless it's an elims match.
Yeah, so, like, Ohio, they'll double like 600 times just to get a point advantage, and that's not like to talk shit on them. They're fighting to the rule set. You can't do those low cuts. Interestingly enough, Ohio allows like toe touches, which I know not everybody does as well. So there's still like low touches, and Trevor and Derek, like they'll land them before you're done blinking. So like there's still like a lot of skill in Ohio. That's not to like discredit them at all, but it is a lot harder to throw those low cuts. You're a lot more incentivized to double, like that one where Woody was going out and Sawyer landed that amazing thrust. Like I think in an Ascalon rule set or a Lynx Cup rule set, that would just turn into a double. He wouldn't have even gone up to parry. He'd just be like, oh, he's coming, I'm just going to stab him, and we're going to be done, and we're going to reset. Yep. So I think that changes a lot.
Yeah, it's the same in my region with the King's Cup rules, where everything is 1 point, and any afterblow to a deep target negates the touch, instead of being -1 point. So, like, you have to play the game very differently, because if I'm stabbing you in the mask and you throw a middle how to the tum-tum, that negates my touch because it counts as a deep target in this rule set. So it changes how the game is played, and I think rule sets really dictate how a fencer trains and thinks about their training. Like, if you drop you and I into this tournament, we'd be able to adapt to the rules, but there would definitely be things that would be a little surprising for us, like the leg cuts especially are not as prevalent in our regions.
I think it's always like, you can argue about like what's the best rule set and have countless arguments about what is or isn't like a good test of whatever. But the cool thing about like people like any of these guys who top 8'd in this tournament is that no matter what, they're gonna win. Like,
yep, agreed.
At least like consistently, the people who win are still on top. So
yeah.
I think the best measure for a good fencer is the one who can adapt to any of these rules. Which again is a cool thing about HEMA, is we don't necessarily have a unified rule set, so we can kind of play around with it and find the one that's fun. And different regions are going to disagree on what's fun, but like the athletic people with good distance management and timing are going to win majority of the time.
Agreed. And this is the thing I will always say: athleticism is a valid strategy. If you can just put a pace on your opponent and put them into bad exchange after bad exchange after bad exchange, it's what it is. Especially in rule sets where you have a lot of passes or multiple rounds, athleticism is everything. Remember, kids, don't just fence, also lift and do cardio.
Unfortunately, it sucks. I'm gonna go do it after we're done here.
Yup. Speaking of, I think that's a good spot to end on. Remember, kids, do your cardio so you can grow up to be like Woody and Sawyer someday.
Yeah.
All right.
Aren't they both? I know, like, Sawyer like 18.
Yeah.